So you don't show up. Speak. So
Here.
Matichek.
Here.
Reichert.
Here.
Sandy. Wozniak. Quorum present.
Thank you. We're doing this meeting via Zoom due to the COVID-19 pandemic and the July time period around the holiday. So we'll start with item 3.1, please.
Ordinance to amend zoning map
Just 1 second. We're
JR2UD.
having some issues, I think, bringing
they can
council
hear me.
chambers in.
Okay. I can read it into the record too if we want.
I think for the record, we should do the minutes.
Yeah, I'll let them know. I don't think they have our microphones on. And they're not seeing me, I don't think. Can you guys hear me?
Alex, are we doing minutes?
I would assume someone's doing minutes.
located along 44th Avenue South between South 34th Street and South 30th Street. And Chairman, if that's okay, I'll just go right into the item.
That would be great, thank
All right,
you.
great. That was also checking, make sure I could hear you well enough, so. Here's 40th Avenue South up here on the north. Here's South Columbia Road, if you can see my screen. And we're going to be looking at some items here along 44th Avenue South. I'll pull up that amendment. What we're looking at is increasing the impervious lot coverage from 35 to 50th, from 35% to 50% for these items. The only call we had was from a neighbor just looking for kind of a breakdown of what our code meant, and actually probably worked in some improvements that I'll make in the future when we send out this mailing to kind of break down the language a little bit better. So we have our official language, and there's what does this really mean. So with that, we're recommending approval pending getting the stormwater report from and having that approval through our city engineering staff. With that, we recommend approval, and this one is a public hearing. And I stand for any questions that you may have, Alex, or from the other commissioners, and then we should do the official opening, the public hearing
got
and
it.
closing.
Any questions from the commissioners? Seeing none, we'll ask for a public hearing. Anybody want to speak to this issue?
Nobody-
Andrea, do you take care of that, or Ryan?
Yep, I'm looking around, there's nobody in-house to speak on this one.
All right, thank you. We'll bring it back to the commission.
Move approval.
Moved by Kuhn, is there a second?
Second.
Second by Lunsky. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 3.2.
3-3.
Oh yeah, 3.2 has been withdrawn. Item 3.3.
Sorry, yeah, ordinance to amend zoning map, Gateway Planned Unit Development, PUD, and we'll open up the file on this one. So let me zoom in. As you recall, last month, this is along Gateway Drive, and this is the old Select Inn along Gateway Drive. They're looking to convert this to to allow for additional uses, the additional use being residential on the first floor. And the previous request was to get more of a concept of what this would look like. Oop. Let me... So here's some, hopefully they're showing up on the screen there. Here's what the units will look like. I think that was made a request from Mr. Wasvik previously as kind of a concept of what they were going to look like. They look really good on the concepts. They will be small units, but I think they will work, but they are quite micro in terms of the units concepts. But this is kind of, there is a market for these, I think. So with that, we do have the applicant here if there's any other questions, and as on the previous item, this one is public hearing, so there's no one in the audience here, but we do need to do the official opening and closing of the hearing as well.
Any questions for Mr. Brooks?
I do. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Ryan, what's the difference between a motel zoning, would that be a B3 or whatever?
That would be a B3, yeah.
Going to this one bedroom, basically apartments, right?
Mm-hmm.
So what's that zoning? R3, 4?
Well, what we're doing is we're still keeping it in B3, but allowing residential on the main floor. and it's going to be permanent housing. So in this case, the difference between a hotel that even does extended stay, in this case, it's just permanent stay, so it's going to be
Okay.
very similar to that.
Because there's a lot of businesses around here, plus an empty building next to it now.
Yep, that's correct.
I'm just concerned about the kind of precedent where we could set these apartments in the middle of a business section anytime we wanted to, I guess.
Yeah, and that's one of the reasons we go through these requirements in terms of doing the rezoning to do something like this. And I believe, I know the unit next door is for sale. It's the old Bobcat, and I think there's a potential sale going on there, and as I understand it, they're aware of, of this potential as well as the current owner, so.
I have a little bit of reservations for it, but yet I am very happy that they're cleaning it up and they're going to change the building, and, because it's kind of a mess there right now.
It is, yep. And
So-
what we don't want is this falling into disrepair. In, what we've had in other cases is hotels that do the extended stay and it kind of becomes permanent stay and they become a real mess.
Yeah.
They're looking to try to clean this up and go about it the right way of trying to, so thank you for the comments, and yeah, that's one of the reasons that they're going about this
I'm just a
way,
little
so.
concerned that we don't have this happening in other areas.
Yeah, and, there's going to be, we know the hotel market right now is not good in Grand Forks, and there's been a dive. We think it's going to come back, but in this case, this one was already off the market even before that, so.
Well, there's going to be a lot of open buildings in Grand Forks, we all know that, so
Yeah.
it's just, everybody's scrambling to find a use for them,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, and this agenda has some other areas too, where we're looking to work with owners before the properties go into disrepair, so that we can look at what the options are.
And they're all going to come to us and the city council first?
Potentially, it depends on if, in this case, the ones that are coming before us is because they're looking at doing something that's outside of what zoning would require. If it was within what zoning would require, then
wouldn't
they
be here,
can.
right,
It's
yeah.
administrative, and we work with them.
So
In
it's
this
going to
case,
remain, it's going to remain a B3
it's going to remain a B3, but it's also going to allow permanent
with a
housing.
non-conforming use?
It's going to be a conforming use because he's going through a PUD that allows the permanent housing on
Okay,
the
all right.
first floor. Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions from the commission?
Well, just to hear the comments here.
Okay, it doesn't appear so. Open the public hearing. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on this issue? See anyone, Ryan?
No.
Andrea, do you see anybody? All right, we'll bring it back to the commission.
Move approval.
Moved by Sandy,
Second.
second by, was that Johnson?
Yep.
All right, I can't see everybody on the screen, so, move approval, second, any discussion? Call for a vote, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 3-4?
3-4 is ordinance to amend zoning map, the rezone Lot B, Block 16, Skidmore Edition, from an R4 multifamily district to a B3 general business district. And before I get going, I will let you know that there is someone in the audience to talk on this one as well, but I'll go through and brief it first, Mr. Reichert.
Thank you.
So on this, I'll zoom back out. So this area is Gateway Drive, and here's Mill Road here. I'm going to zoom into Seaward Avenue, which is just, it's
You
the
know, I
next
don't think
street
you have us
north.
up- I don't think you have us up on, we're just seeing you.
Cheryl, can you switch to the computer view?
Perfect.
Can you guys see that now? So here's Gateway Drive, here's Mill Road. And Seaward Avenue is parallel to Gateway Drive, just to the north. This is as we start to get into the Riverside neighborhood. So as I start to zoom in, the actual request here is 501. And I'll highlight this property, and then I'll bring in the zoning layer and then I'll turn it off quickly, just so you guys can see. So here's R4, this kind of brown color is R4, which is a multifamily district. B3 is this red, and that's the commercial district. And the request, and I'll turn this back off because it starts to make a little bit harder to read. So the property owner of 501 is also the property owner of 503. The house that's on 501 is a rental property. It's in fairly rough shape, as I understand it. The applicant wants to tear down this property. He's going to combine these two properties together, and he's going to put up a shop in this general location here. And so to do that, of course, to expand that commercial property, he does need to get this rezoned, and he needs to tear down this property, which is would make it a non-conforming use. So he's going through the steps of doing it the right way. We do know that we have received one call. I'll go through that one first. The previous owner here had a lot of commercial property, vehicles that were spilling out onto the street, and we'll hear potentially maybe there's still some of that going on. But I think his intent is to get those inside a building, so that's one of the reasons to expand. And then the next concern is how will this be screened? So typically our B3 is screened, but I think there is a request, and there's going to be somebody else coming to the podium that wants to have a discussion too on screening of the property. So this is a rental property over here. Right now the property line goes right here, and we could certainly set up that screening anywhere within this area to screen that property. So before I go too much further, I'll kind of hold to see if there's any questions from the commission before we open that up, if that's all right, Alex.
Yeah, and I have a question. So are we erasing, or is there a request to replat this as well, get rid of the lot line there, or?
That can be done administratively. So what would happen
Okay.
is
Okay.
they would submit a paper application, and we can do that administratively only because they're in the same plat already.
Okay, all right. Any other questions from the commission before we hear from? No? Okay, Ryan, go ahead.
All right, I'll stand. If you want to open up the public hearing, I'll let the person from the audience come up to the podium.
Perfect, we'll open the public hearing at this time. Sir, come forward, state your name and address for the record, please.
Yep.
My name's Tom Balanchuk, and I live
Can you move up a little closer to the microphones, please?
Yep.
Lift them up too to get closer to you.
Tom Balanchuk, 1502 North 6th Street. I'm about, I'm on the corner of Seward and North 6th Street. I have a few comments. More and more commercialization in this area, I worry, is devaluing my property. I've already had this happen with another house I owned in Grand Forks. Cities don't compensate people for this kind of thing. They, as I was, threatened to condemn your property, which was done to me at a finance committee meeting. And I was told that my house would be taken away from me. A large propane tank across the street doesn't help any of this either, the looks of the area. The owner told me the city told him he had to put the tank there and not on his Mill Road property, which would have made a lot more sense, it seemed to me, because it would have made the area less commercial looking. More commercial property also increases noise and traffic, both of which are already off the charts in this area. It was not like this when I bought my house and for the first couple years after, but has been escalating ever since. There are derelict vehicles on this property that they want rezoned. Two have been there for about a year. The other was just towed there about a month ago. Before that, it sat on the street for a month and a half. And I don't know how a vehicle can sit on the street for a month and a half without getting a ticket or a police tow. But I've seen it happen on this property more than once. The vehicle was moved within a couple hours of me calling the police. The property is looking more and more like a slum. Bringing in an ugly semi-trailer not only adds to that, but was dangerous in the process. They ripped the soffits off part of their building, hit the power line pole beside the building, cracking it and causing what sounded like an explosion on the back side of my house when the power lines pulled tight. They put in a new pole for more room, but the trailer keeps sinking into the ground and leaning against the pole. They've fixed this a couple times, but it's leaning on the pole right now. If this pole gets knocked over, I believe it would cause a domino effect which could pull other poles in line with it down, since it's the last one in the lines to anchor all the others. I've looked at some other properties like this in Grand Forks, and it might be a good idea, because of all the junk that they have thrown underneath this semi-trailer and around the property, to require them to fence in with screening and a gate so that the property is completely closed off from anybody viewing it in the neighborhood. It would also be a safety feature for them, or for kids or whatever getting into the property. And it would make it look a lot better for the rest of the neighborhood. I would not approve any permit until they show good faith by cleaning up the vehicles and getting the semi-trailer out and the junk that's piled around and under it cleaned up. I've got some pictures to submit. Property around the area is not taken care of regularly. I've been after the public health department for years to try and get this kind of thing done. I have pictures of the derelict vehicles, the propane tanks, the semi-trailer sitting against the power line poles, the van sitting on the street for a month and a half. It was towed off the street. So it was a dead vehicle, and then I brought in a couple of ideas for, I looked at some other properties and what they do as far as screening their property from view of the neighbors around their property. I guess that's all I have to say, thanks.
Thank you, sir. Is there a way that we can see those pictures? Is there a way that those can be published to us?
Yeah, there's two things I can do. I'll lay them on I don't know how well, Cheryl, I'm gonna ask to kind of work on the fly here, but can you zoom in on that? I don't know if it's gonna come up that well because they're fairly small. And then I'll hand them to Frank as well.
I'll get them here, won't I?
No, the camera's not working, so there's two things that we can do. I'm gonna get these to Frank, but we could put these out. It's probably not gonna be an instantaneous thing for the committee. So, is the applicant on the phone?
No.
He's not on the phone? So, there's two things. We could certainly table this. I could bring this out. And we could send this out for the next meeting, but I can certainly try to get to the commission's wishes on this one. But in this case, there's a lot of information. So if this is these are of this property?
Yeah.
Okay.
Most of them are recent, except for the one that shows the trailer next to two telephone or power line poles.
Mm-hmm.
That's from 2016.
So he's got them dated, and he is saying it's of the property. This one we might want to table, just because there's a lot of information here, and if this isn't up to code, I think we may want to take some more time and put some of this together and maybe send it out to you for the next meeting if you guys want to table it, especially if the applicant isn't here to answer those questions.
All right, Ms. Sandy, did you
Yeah,
have your hand up?
I have
Yeah,
a question.
To table this, because I'd like to know first if they're getting calls from the health department, if this is actually a troublesome property the way it is, then it doesn't seem fair to the neighborhood to give them, more property to use for their business in this way, so I would move to table.
All right, it's been moved by Ms. Sandy to table. Is there a second?
I'll second. Alex, I got a quick question.
Yeah, second by Kuhn, normally not debatable or amendable, but Cole or Mr. Johnson, did you have a comment?
Yeah, I was just wondering what type of business is ran in that lot right now?
Well, I'll answer it, but just so you know, items that are tabled aren't to be discussed, but it is Nate's Electric is the business.
I know,
Yeah, I'm
I know
going to
items,
close any discussion. So we're going to have a vote on this. All those in favor of tabling this to the next meeting signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. The item is tabled to the next meeting. Now, we'll move on to item, what are we, 3.5?
Mr. Chairman? Mr. Chairman?
Yes. Yes, sir.
I know we tabled it, but could we make sure that by the next meeting, we have an actual plan of what he's going to do, if he's going to tear down the house and the building, or what's going to be there, so when we bring it up again, we actually know what we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, I would assume that the applicant, even though he's not on right now, would be made aware of the fact that there are some concerns from the commission and the neighborhood, and that he would get us the appropriate information so that we can make an informed decision.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Matichek. We're going to move on to item 3.5, please.
Item 3.5 is appeal to the detailed development plan for gravel contractor store yard at 4575 32nd Avenue South. It's Mac Construction. And I will zoom in on the property. Oop. So hopefully you can see my screen. Here's 32nd Avenue South. Here's South 42nd Street. Here's the Pilot gas station truck stop that's out in that location. The actual area we're going to be looking at is those old, just north of the old Black Gold area, just to the west of there. And here's the old Grand Forks Grocery and US Foods area. And the area that we're going to be looking at is right on the backside. They had some expansion to the property that was going on. As we did that, we noticed that there was a gravel storage area that was right to the west of that property. Here's, like I said, here's 32nd up here. That gravel storage, as Andrea started to take a look, noticed that gravel storage, and she kind of flagged it for that and said, hey, if we're going to do that, there is a process. We went through this recently. We're allowing it in industrial areas, but this one is actually labeled as B3, although it is a B3. This area does feel kind of industrial, so we thought maybe it had merit to actually bring to the Planning Commission, go through this the right way. We are looking to have it screened, and because there is this parking lot for US Foods that is directly to the west. The area is really hard to see from 32nd, although it is adjacent. As you come from the west across this area, it's really hard to see this, but we are asking for that area to be opaque fence, block screened, similar to what actually the gentleman before talked about, wanting some of these storage areas to be screened. So we are proposing that and have discussed that with the applicant, and they understand that. So with that, the applicant I know is on as well, and we would stand for any questions that you may have on this one as well.
Mr. Brooks, about how many square feet of gravel area are we looking at? It looks fairly small from what I saw, but
Yeah, it is fairly small. Andrea, who's on the line, may be able to answer what the exact square footage is, and she's probably measuring it as we speak.
Give me a minute, but Zach might have a better, Zach with Mac Construction might have a better.
They're measuring it, I think, Alex.
okay, thank you.
Or perhaps asking the applicant would work best, who's on the line as well.
Sorry, Ryan, I'm just pulling it up here right now.
While we're waiting, Mr. Brooks, is the department recommending approval of this?
Yeah, with this screening, we are recommending approval. It is there, and not that that's a reason to allow it, but what we thought even if this hadn't been a find, so to speak, we actually think it does make sense because this area is somewhat industrial in nature, although it's officially commercial. As you go to the south, it's kind of become this B3/I1 kind of mix, so it does work in this area, we think. In addition, it wasn't a complaint that drew it to us, so it appears that most folks in the neighborhood have been okay with it, but in this case, we just want to do it the right way, and just because the current neighbors are okay with it doesn't mean a future one wouldn't have an issue with it as well. And we think.
And Ryan, Mr. Brooks, if we approve this, it's not on a conditional use, it's approved for all time, correct?
Right, it would be an appeal to the detailed development plan, which does go into the file.
Okay. And as I recall from the last one that we approved, the reason was because it was just going to get torn up because they were putting such heavy equipment down on it at the Bobcat facility. Does it appear that we have that concern here?
No, I think this is a pure storage area. I don't think there's heavy equipment, but Zach, you can correct me if I'm wrong, what the reason.
Yeah, it's just basically storage for us. We use it, basically the side yard is just for trailer storage, and the actual fenced-in yard in the back is more or less just skid steer attachments, extra lumber up on racking, and really just kind of general storage. Nothing too crazy.
Any other questions from the commissioners while they're still looking for that?
I have a question, Alex.
Go ahead, Ms. Sandy.
Well, I'm concerned because haven't we, in the past, didn't Simonson have to do asphalt rather than gravel on theirs? And didn't Revolution Power Sports have to get rid of their gravel lot? And I'm actually asking. I believe they both did. And how would this be different? I don't see that there's necessarily a reason that they would have to do this, other than perhaps cost savings. And so I think that I'm gonna have a hard time supporting this, because it looks, when you drive out 32nd, things are looking pretty nice, you know. We've got some nice buildings with some nice landscape going up, even though they are more of the commercial industrial. I feel like this is a step back, and then where do we draw the line?
Yeah, I'll take the Revolution one. I do recall that was just out to the west here, and if you can see my pointer, I believe there was some gravel that they had out in this area. It's a little bit more visible than this one, but your point's well taken. That, you know, this area could certainly be, if you wanted to, we could require that it be paved as well. But due to that visibility, that's one of the reasons that we kind of looked at it, and since it was going to be 100% screened, we thought that we would allow that gravel back behind there. I don't think that was the case with Revolution. Simonson, I'm drawing a blank. I don't know if I recall the Simonson, was it Simonson gas station was?
No, it was their lumber
Oh,
yard.
the lumberyard, sure, yep. So that one's, the proximity to residential was the case there. Yeah, I apologize. That was just last month. I think you have residential right behind that area, so that was one of the reasons. In this one, we go a long ways before we have residential, so. But I do see the similarities between the two, Megan, or Miss Sandy.
How long have they owned the property? Is this a new purchase? Or have they owned it for years before some of the other things have come in?
Oh, this is Andrea, if I can jump in. Probably about 2017, 2018, they purchased, Zach, you probably correct me. They purchased the property and came through planning and zoning for, we allowed a contractor shops as an allowable use within their B3 zoning instead of doing it through a CUP. We wrote that contractor shop as an allowable use to the PUD for them so that they could build their back shop area, which is what is attached to this contractor storage yard. So we allowed the contractor shops for rentals for MAC themselves, and then now we're coming back with the contractor's yard, so to speak, as long as the yard is appropriately fenced and screened is more of the reasoning staff was kind of leaning towards it. So.
And in general, do we allow gravel with contractor shops?
We would for it and if it was zoned industrial, but because this is B3, no, we left that purposely so that any B3 would have to come before the commission on a case-by-case basis to evaluate its merit.
So far with our contractor shops, nobody has asked to just do gravel.
Not since we've changed, since that was a recent change. There's probably other contractor yards. I want to say those have come through Board of Adjustments, like I know CMS and Molstead up on north end by the landfill. They all had delayed pavings for gravel yards, which at this point we probably would, because that was approved prior to the code being changed, we'd have to grant them approval not to put the paving in when that 10 years is up. But they're zoned industrial, so they could not pave that under the new regulations.
And I should mention as well that the front part of this, where most people see as the front of this building, that is hard pavement. This is that kind of the storage that's back behind that, people coming up or people that are accessing Pilot aren't going to see as much or at all if it's screened, so.
And Ryan, this is Zach, if I could jump in for a second. Our long-term goal is to, like a 5 to 10 year for us would be to pave this area. It's just right now, we're trying more or less, where our goal, like I said, our 5 to 10 year goal is to have everything that is, that would be included in this gravel paved. It's just more of a temporary deal for us than a long-term solution.
So then Alex, could I ask a question?
Go ahead.
So if that's the case, could this be something that we just give a delay? Give a 5-year?
Yes. Yeah, we have done those in the past, Megan, so we could certainly make that a 5-year a limit on that. So that is something, just so you're aware too, that the Board of Adjustments have done in the past as well, give time limited in terms of how long that gravel then has to become hard pavement.
Okay. So when the time is appropriate, Alex, I would like to make the motion that they get a delay of 5 years.
Okay, I don't think we've opened the public hearing yet. Why don't we go ahead and do that now? We'll open the public hearing since we're already getting comments. Mr. Brooks, is there anyone there that wants to speak to this issue?
No one in-house.
Okay. Does anyone else on the commission have any questions? We'll start with Mr. Lunsky.
Yeah, is there going to be detail on where the screening is going to be put before we approve this? So we're not just kind of giving them a blank canvas to do anything on?
Yeah, Andrew, maybe you can talk to what was in the packet on this one?
Sure. So right behind so there's a fence outlining, Ryan, hopefully you can follow along, the edge of the property line, which would be the screening that they're proposing. So actually it's more, what you're showing, Ryan, is what's current, or what they plan to pave. It would be all of the kind of hatched area on the west side over and around the shop. Yep.
Right there.
So about how many feet of screening are they going to have to install around that area? Do we have any idea?
I had a rough calculation of about 35,000 square feet of gravel and whatever perimeter fence. I don't know the square footage of that.
So Andrea, it's on the bottom here. It's 25,000 square feet of gravel, and we would have, 1 second here. About 300 feet of screening to put up.
Okay, I think if we can, make sure that's all detailed in there, and do a 5-year agreement to get the rest of it, cleaned up and fixed up, I think that should be good to go.
So we'll have them highlight on the plan what that screening is, the fencing and that type, and then talk about that limit, or that time limit as well. Whatever comes out of this committee will be on the plan as well.
And then probably detail the area that needs to be paved within 5 years.
Yep.
And Ryan, we see this just one time, correct?
That's correct.
And then it goes to city council?
Andrea, can you help me out on that one again, whether this one goes forward?
The P&Z has final action on appeals, just like Board of Adjustments has final action on variances.
All right,
So Alex, if I could,
go ahead.
I think I think staff can figure out the appropriate screening and landscaping. Is that correct? Isn't it pretty straightforward? So that we wouldn't need to see it. I mean, I hate for this to have to come back so that we can look at that.
Well, I would assume we could approve.
It's important that it be there.
I think as long as it's called out, I think we're good, and we'll, rely on the staff to make sure it's what's right.
That's what I'd understand the motion, is that we would just have that detailed on the plan, and that would go in the file, and again, then this is final action.
So I would be good with that.
Okay, I'm going to close the public hearing as long as there's no one else to speak. Bring it back to the commission. Ms. Sandy, I'll recognize you for a motion.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we give them a 5-year delay for paving their storage area. But that we do put into place the screening and landscaping requirements that are set forth by staff.
All
And
right.
really, I just want to say too that, I think it's great, they're doing good business in town, and so it's not that I want to stand in the way of that or give them extra expenses right now, but I think that this is a good compromise so that they can move forward, but we can be sure that we're doing the right thing for all the surrounding areas as well. And
All right,
moving
is it-
people come for requests.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Second by Mr. Kuhn. Now, I will open it up for discussion. Anyone else want to speak to this issue? Or Ms. Sandy, did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Thank you.
All right, at this time I'll call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Item 4.1.
4.1 is ordinance to amend zoning map, rezone Lot 1, Block 1, Grand Cities Mall re-subdivision from B2 Shopping Center District to B3 General Business District, located at 1900 South Washington. Mr. Chairman, if I may, I'll continue it on the item. Here's 17th Avenue South here. Here's South Washington Street. This is the Kmart property, so I'll zoom in a little bit. This area is all B2, which is, as I said, is our shopping zone district. There's very few areas that are left as just B2, this being one of them, and of course the mall area, the rest of the mall areas as well. The applicant is looking to purchase this property, and in doing so, they're looking to free it up a little bit in terms of what they want to do with the property by making it B3. Like I said, most of our other commercial districts in town are B3. They've also shared with us some pictures, and I'll put those up on the screen here as well. So they're looking to actually do some storage areas here. Their future goal is to have some retail shops on the front and storage back behind. This is being done actually in many areas throughout in terms of big box conversions where storage goes on the backside and retail shops on the front. So there's one view of it. They actually had 3 views. I think they're all pretty similar. The applicant is here. This is preliminary approval, and so staff is recommending approval. As I said, this is being done throughout the country, and so we think that this is kind of that. We have some empty areas. There's some flexibility desired. In this case, normally you probably would have saw if Kmart was being built today, they would have came as a B3, and this would have been allowed. So we're recommending this move forward. I think we should also give the applicant some ability to stand and actually talk a little bit about what they're looking to do with the project. And but we are recommending approval because the next step is where we actually go. We notify the neighborhood, let them know we mail 400 feet around. And there is some residential that's on the backside, but I think overall, a project like this, there's actually going to be reduced traffic in the area with this. So I would anticipate probably some favorable comments, but in this case, it's recently closed, and so we're kind of catching it before it goes into being vacant for too long. So with that, I'll stand for any questions, but if you so choose, the applicant is here as well.
Any questions from the commission for Mr. Brooks? Okay, not seeing any. I don't personally, we don't have a public hearing on this, and this is just preliminary, is that right?
That's correct.
Okay, unless, I don't think I need to hear from the applicant. I think anything we can do here is good, and I really like this plan, but does anybody want to hear from the applicant?
Did you want to make some comments? Okay.
Doesn't appear so. I'll bring it back to the commission. Is there a motion?
I'll move approval. I think anything we can do to keep this from getting to be a complete eyesore in the next year or two is good.
Moved by Mr. Kuhn for approval. It looked like Mr. Lunsky, you had your hand up. Did you want to second that? Yep. Second from Mr. Lunsky. Is there any discussion? Doesn't appear so. I'm going to call for a vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Are there any reports from the planning department?
Nothing, just thank you for your flexibility tonight. We have staff kind of scattered around trying to make these meetings work, so we appreciate your patience with us.
Well, I'll tell you what, speaking on behalf of me and I think the entire commission, I think you guys have done a great job in setting this up and running these things in a less than ideal manner. And I'm sure that right now, your job is not easy trying to keep business moving in Grand Forks, but I think you're doing a great job. Anything else from any of the commissioners for other business or from the planning department for other business? Seeing none, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
motion.
Moved by Mr. Lunsky, is there a
Second.
second? Second by Mr. Kuhn. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Motion carries. Thank you, everybody. Have a great and safe 4th of July.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.